Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. Today the special occasion is that I have finally read Alfred Döblin's Berlin Alexanderplatz. I cannot tell you how many times I picked up this novel from the shelf and I was decided to get into it and to read it, but then there's that anxiety about the long novel, right? The anxiety of the monstrous novel. I really enjoy long novels. I like, War and Peace, The Brothers Karamazov, Moby Dick, Don Quixote, many more, right? And what I like about them is that you don't emerge from a reading of these texts the same person. Your whole outlook has changed after you have experienced these texts. But on the other hand, I am a very slow reader, so I really need to be in the mood to read one of these long novels. I need to sit down and say, look, I'm going to spend at least 1 week of my life with this book. And the experience is most of the time very rewarding, but as I said, it's a question of time. This novel took me 1 week to read, and for me that is actually a very good time, because as I said, I am a very slow reader. Now, if you have heard anything about Döblin's Berlin Alexanderplatz, it's probably that it is similar to James Joyce's Ulysses. This is always compared to Ulysses. Many people may even call it the German Ulysses. The comparison is understandable, but at the same time it's unfair. I mean, I can see there are many points of contact between the two books. Ulysses was published in 1922. Berlin Alexanderplatz is from 1929. We have an anti-hero, we have an antagonist, we have many women, many female characters, but one central female character that the anti-hero is preoccupied with. We also have the idea of the city, right? They are both urban novels. So some people might say, well, Berlin Alexanderplatz does for Berlin what Ulysses did for Dublin. And yes, that's definitely there. And then, of course, we have the preoccupation with language. Language is one of the central issues. It's almost a character in itself in both novels. At the same time, there are many differences, but there is one main difference that I would like to mention, and it's the fact that Berlin Alexanderplatz is a much more homogeneous novel than Ulysses. If you remember, Ulysses has quite a disjointed structure. Every chapter seems to be a completely different thing, and of course this is done on purpose, right? But Berlin Alexanderplatz, you don't have that. It reads much more smoothly, if you want to put it that way. The author, Alfred Döblin, he's not very well known here in the US. I think he belongs to the generation of Thomas Mann. And of course, he has probably been eclipsed by Thomas Mann, which is also understandable because Thomas Mann, as you know, is a giant, is one of these monumental figures of literature. And he kind of took up a lot of what is German literature during the war years and the pre-war years, just as Goethe had done in previous years too. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Now, one important thing about Döblin that people should realize is that even though he's not very well known in the English-speaking world, he was tremendously influential in the generation that came after him, the post-war generation of German writers. His influence can be felt primarily in the work of authors such as Günter Grass and Heinrich Böll. So keep that in mind as you explore the work of Alfred Döblin. Now let me tell you briefly about the story. I don't know if this is true, but they say that if you have a bird in a cage and you take it out of that cage, that bird is soon going to try to re-enter the cage again. This is a perfect illustration of what we are told in the novel Berlin Alexanderplatz. This is the story of one Franz Bieberkopf. This guy has been in prison for murdering a woman, and as the novel begins, he is getting out of prison and trying to reintegrate himself into society and finding many difficulties in the process. So in a sense, what we're looking at is the idea that the past is inescapable, that no matter what you do, that past is always there with you, and it just keeps following you, right? So we're going to see Franz interacting with a lot of characters, petty criminals, not so petty criminals, and also with a series of women. There's Eva, there's Lena, there's Celie, there's also the most important one, Misa. And throughout the novel we see him sort of revealing himself through his interactions with these characters as he tries to become a good citizen and to integrate himself once again into society. Regarding the approach, as I mentioned before, this is an urban novel. So the idea that Döblin has is basically to show us what life is like in this big human hive. I'm using the metaphor of hive here deliberately. There's a novel by Camilo José Cela titled The Hive, which actually covers, in a similar way, life in Madrid, right? So we have the human hive, the urban space, and so we have a lot of characters. The novel, Berlin Alexanderplatz, it's at once realistic and unrealistic. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. It's realistic in the sense that it tries to capture reality in a big city in the most immediate way, by jumping from one thing to another, for example. But it is also unrealistic in certain ways. For example, there's a moment in which we read about a woman who is dropping a letter in a mailbox. And then all of a sudden, the author, the narrator, lets us read that letter, just like that. It's completely unrealistic, right? We don't know what's in that letter. Only the woman knows and the person who's going to receive it. But it's like we enter that envelope and we are allowed to read the contents of the letter. Very unrealistic, right? As a result of this urban approach, we have a multitude of characters. And this example that I just gave you, the woman who's dropping the letter in the mailbox, we don't even know her name. We just read about her in one paragraph and we then read the letter. And that's it. Because the novel has such an immense scope when it comes to the number of characters. I mentioned language before. This is really one of the characters of the novel. You have heard the quote by Marshall McLuhan, "The medium is the message." This is really illustrated in Berlin Alexanderplatz in a wonderful way. As you read the novel, you're going to see that there are references to popular songs constantly. You may be reading a paragraph and you may realize that it is rhymed, right? There are many instances of onomatopoeia too. And also very importantly, some references to biblical passages. For example, ideas from Ecclesiastes. This idea that there is time for everything, right? Döblin keeps coming back to that. Images from the book of Revelation. Images from the book of Job. Many biblical episodes. So it really helps to have at least a basic knowledge of the Bible as you're reading Berlin Alexanderplatz, so you can catch all these references. So what's the main topic here? I would say the central subject of Berlin Alexanderplatz is the concept of the loss of ideals. This is nothing new, especially in the German literature of that time. We have to remember Thomas Mann, Hermann Hesse. Actually, The Magic Mountain and Steppenwolf are from the same decade that Berlin Alexanderplatz was published. So this is hardly surprising. Even in other places of Europe, I think as Berlin Alexanderplatz, yes, this is right, as Berlin Alexanderplatz was being published in France, Louis Ferdinand Céline was beginning to write Journey to the End of the Night. So we are dealing with this type of novel. It's what I would call the diagnosis novel. And the diagnosis is not a good one, right? These authors are saying we are living in a very sick society, a very sick world, and this society is just rushing towards destruction, right? So this is the type of novel that we are dealing with. Now, the difference with Döblin is that for Döblin, there is space for salvation. Salvation really is an option for him. And you see this in the ending of the novel, perhaps. I'm not going to tell you the ending. One thing I will say is that to me it sounded like the ending was almost esoteric. And if you can accept this, and after reading the novel, you can say if you agree or not. I compare the ending of Berlin Alexanderplatz in some ways, of course, to the ending of Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Maybe that's just me. It's up to you to decide whether you agree with me or not when it comes to that. There is, of course, an adaptation of Berlin Alexanderplatz by Rainer Werner Fassbinder. It was done in 1980. And this is one of the longest films ever made. It's 15 and a half hours long. I don't think I have seen a movie that long so far. I plan to watch it, but I need to find a copy of it. And though you do have to keep this in mind, it may be considered a TV miniseries. So depending on how you look at it, it is a very long feature film or not. Bottom line, Berlin Alexanderplatz, I believe, is definitely worth your time. I dedicated, as I said, 1 week of my life to it, and I was really captivated by it. I did not feel that it was over long or anything like that. The translation was also very good. There are two versions out there. There's a British translation and an American one. I read the American translation, so it's the older one. My edition was published in 1983, but it's the 6th printing, so I'm guessing maybe it's from the 70s, the translation for the version published by Frederick Ungar in New York. So those are your two options when it comes to a version of this novel. If you're looking for more Döblin, Mountains, Oceans, and Giants is another famous novel by him. It has been described as a difficult novel. It's very experimental. There are apparently no protagonists in it, but that is definitely the next step that I would take. I have not read it, but I mean, this is the novel that I would read after Berlin Alexanderplatz, if I ever get the time to do that. And if you're looking for more German literature, and if you have not read Günter Grass's The Tin Drum, please make that a priority. That is one of my favorite novels ever, not only within the context of German literature, but just in general of all literature. And I can guarantee that that novel is going to change your life and your perspective on literature. I hope you enjoyed this video, my 2 cents on Berlin Alexanderplatz. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.